I think you are competitive. I think you fantasize that you're not competitive. Both Rob and I were in Italy, but we weren't able to line up schedules.
Yeah. One of us tried a little bit harder, I think, than the other one did. But some of us, it did cause me to reflect upon our friendship a little bit. Yeah. Yes. As someone who always wanted, as a little kid who always wanted friends more, it just took me back a little bit. So I understand now, Dave. We're at a different stage. I get it.
I do appreciate the opportunity to sort of set the hierarchy in the relationship. You sort of, keep you wanting true. More. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as you know, Dave, my wife and I become very obsessed with The Amazing Race. Around the end of last year, beginning of this year, we started watching it. And those shows really don't generally appeal to me. It's like it seems fake. The competition seems fake. It's all just a curated entertainment experience. And
yes,
it doesn't really fly with me.
I do feel like you are, just as a side note, you are light on superficial gossip. You know what I mean? Like, I think you'll gossip about like your immediate circle, but you're not like you don't care what's happening to the Kardashians.
No.
Do you know what I mean? You're not. No. That's not your thing.
In fact, I can't stand it.
Yeah.
So this is what I want to talk about today. It was surprising to me that I would like a show like this because there is some of that manufactured drama and competition that really isn't there, right? The editing's great.
Yep.
But I'm hooked line and sinker into the show, and the competition part of it I really get at. And it caused me to think I'm not someone who is competitive, not an athlete, never been an athlete. I have things that I'm competitive about. Well, you and I can talk about that, but historically, competition has not been a big part of how I see myself. And so I started thinking a little bit about like, why am I not a competitive person? Why has that not been a big part of who I am? And why is competition something that people talk about? Why is it valued kind of in life? I think you think of athletes and you think of the most competitive athletes are the ones that people know about. And that could be because they're successful or whatever reason, but it just caused me to think a little bit more about competition, why some people are competitive and why they're not. And so that's what I want to talk about today is what's good about competition. Why do we care about it? And maybe what's not so great about competition and why shouldn't we care about it as much as we do?
Okay. I have an immediate reaction to you.
Go.
My immediate reaction is, I think, well, first of all, in our last podcast, you said something like, I don't know what I'm doing, but people think that I am a hippie.
Yes.
And my neighbor, I don't get
my neighbor, yes.
All of a sudden thinks that like all I do is eat tofu.
Eat kale and tofu, yeah.
Yeah, drive an electric car, which he does.
Which I do.
You
too.
Yep. And now, but I got the one with the red calipers to go fast. You got the one that's like, I want to be easy on the environment. I think you bought 2 Priuses in a row.
I did. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
hook, line, you're right.
So the neighbor appraised you accurately, but
very accurate.
I think and quickly. So, but I think one of the things, I think you are competitive. I think you fantasize that you're not competitive. Like, okay. I feel like you, I almost feel like you can't be as successful as you have been without stacking yourself up against other people. Like at every step of the game of your like academic career, your professional career, I think don't tell anybody I said this about you, but I think you've elevated to the top in every setting. I just have a hard time believing that you could just do it because you're like trying to maximize your own performance. Like this whole idea of like, oh, I'm competing against myself or what. I feel like you must be behind the, you're in your closet competing, and then you come out and you're like, hey, I love everybody. I really don't care who gets the job. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I think is going on.
So I do think you're onto something, because in preparation for our conversation today, I did think through like, what am I competitive about? Talked to my wife a little bit about it as well. And again, don't tell anyone that I said this about you, but you hit the nail on the head. It's my intellect.
And
it's always been. So even from, so what am I competitive about? It's that. Even from a young age. So this goes back to the dorky things I did as a kid, right? Like I didn't play sports, didn't play soccer, baseball. But guess what? I was in the state geography B.
Yeah.
Right.
But I looked at map. I could look at a map like you would not
Right.
believe.
Exactly. Like nobody's business. It was always in my grades and ability to achieve scholastically that I'm like, all right, well, I may not be the most popular kid. I may not be an athlete. I may not be this, but I'm smarter than all you people. And I think there is a strain. I don't think there is a strain of that still continues today. Is like, all right, that is a big part of how I see myself, and I am competitive at that level for sure. For sure.
Did you do sports and then opt out, or did you just never interested?
Opt out. So that assumes that I had the choice.
Yeah.
I did do my, I did do baseball. I can't remember if I wanted to do it or if someone wanted me to do it. And it was pitch ball. So I was like, what, first grade, second grade?
Pitch ball means that another kid's throwing it at you?
No, the coach is throwing it at you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Very like underhand, right? This is not competitive baseball. I from all accounts, I was not a star performer. My only memory and recollection of this, and this is only because my parents will tell me about this, is I was in the outfield, right? So when we were playing defense, I'm out in the outfield, and when you're 6 or 7 years old, not many balls make it to the outfield. But what instead was extremely fascinating for me was the ecosystem of insects that were living in the grass. So I'd be sitting there playing with the roly-polies and the crickets and the grasshoppers and everything down there. And meanwhile, a ball would just be passing by me and I'm not paying any attention to it.
Yeah.
And my parents would be screaming from the stands, Robbie, pay attention to the ball. And I'm not paying attention to the ball. So I was never very good at it. And this is something we'll talk about with competition too. There's probably a reason why I self-selected out of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's me with competition. What about you?
I was going to say, I was thinking about baseball. I was also not a skilled baseball player. I remember my dad. I just remember being in the backyard and he would be wanting to play catch with me. And I mean, I would love to go back and watch what it looked like now, but in my mind, he was throwing fucking rockets at me, and he would not let me. Like the ball would come to me, and I would step out of the way of the ball, and I would catch it over here, right? Catch it over here, and he's like, "No, catch it in front of your face."
Yep.
And I found that so terrifying. And then I remember being in a game, and I was also an outfielder, and for some reason, I had to be on the pitcher's mound, but it wasn't coach pitch or kid pitch. It was a machine pitch. So I was just stationed like between the pitcher's mound and first base, and the machine pitched it. And
so what, did you just put the ball in the machine?
No, a coach did. I just stood there next to the coach. And some kid hit a ball. It went to the first baseman and he bent down to pick it up and it hit a rock and then popped him right in the nose. Yeah. And he just squirted. I mean, again, in my mind, blood went everywhere.
It was a murder scene. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a murder scene. No, thank you. And I think that was last season I played baseball. So I also that was not my sport.
But you were an athlete.
Yeah, I was. I think, as a kid, but I don't know. It's funny because I maybe it had to do with aptitude, although I don't think I was that good, like when I was early on, but I hit like fourth grade, fifth grade, I was big. I was like the same size. I was bigger than everybody. And so I was good at, I was faster and I was good at soccer. And so that's like how my identity was formed. So for me, I think that I got competitive because like I thought it was cool to be competitive. I thought it was cool to be derailed if you lost a game. I thought it was cool to be hyper aggressive. And I grew up in an environment with my stepdad and my biological father, both of whom super competitive. And like that, I was like the idea. I was bred that that's how you were supposed to be.
Yeah,
I think as a man, like you just needed to be.
Yeah,
competition was king.
Yeah. I was going to bring this up later, but when researching for our topic today, that is a question that I thought to myself is, at least stereotypically, it does seem to be, at least in our culture, that men are more competitive than women are.
Yes.
And I wondered if that's true.
Or
And
if they're sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
and I would argue that if you're female, it's viewed negatively.
okay, like a
You think?
competitive woman is evaluated poorly.
Yes.
Okay,
Like it's unsightly for a woman in our society to be competitive versus it's like a masculine trait for men.
okay, so yeah, so you're less womanly if you're overly competitive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's some people who research this, and I don't have the research, but I have a quote, and I have it up in front of me. So what they found, this was a Stanford study, and the researcher asked men and women in the lab, "Do you want to compete or not?" 70% of the guys said yes. 30% of the women said yes. That's a 40% difference. So it's a large difference of people who say
Mm-hmm.
yes, they're competitive. And when people talk about the work, I think the conclusion that they drew, and this is from studies subsequent to this one, it's not that women can't compete. It's that at times they don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my favorite quote here is in, let's see, where is it? That women are really good at calculating their odds of success compared to men, and men are really good at ignoring them. And so there's some difference there in that, not that women are less competitive, but they're maybe a bit more realistic about, all right, this is something that I might be able to do and that is actually going to be worth my while. And so they're a bit more thoughtful about it before they pursue it, a goal or some sort of task. Whereas men are more likely, according to this line of research, to just blindly go and say, yeah, I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to try it without thinking, well, this is something I can do or not.
Yeah. Okay. Help me think through this with competition. So I have a couple of thoughts. So the first is, I feel like if I don't know that I enjoy competition that I don't take seriously. So like, for example, we have a colleague that was a Division I swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the inner whatever she did, like it's like one lap was freestyle, one lap was breaststroke, one lap was
I don't
whatever.
remember what that's called, but yeah.
Yeah. And I tell her all the time that I'm a faster swimmer than her.
Right.
That I know different techniques that she hasn't been trained on. I'm more efficient. And if it's a longer distance, I think I'll bury her because, I know this total immersion style of swimming. I know realistically that she would smoke me, but I would love to go in the pool and compete with her. Or we have another colleague that was like a Olympic development skier, and she and I went skiing. In the first run, I said, "Let's race. Let's see how fast you are." She smoked me, but it doesn't bother me at all. But I really enjoy that. But if I'm there, so that's one level, and you could call that competitive, but I'm not even I enjoy the competition, but my identity's not locked up in it. But if we go play like ping pong and I allow myself to get invested in the game and I lose, I'm going to freak out. Like, I need to go separate myself from the moment and go calm down because I'm so it's no longer it's no longer fun. And I am also no longer fun.
Is it because you think you're really good at playing ping pong?
I don't know. It's like, if I allow myself to really get invested in the sport, I mean, I'm not that good at ping pong. Like, if you and I played ping pong, I would be joking and relaxed. But because if I let myself get serious about it, it's not going to be fun. I will be fucking aggressive. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like a line where I'm being competitive, but I'm not enjoying it. You wouldn't, no one would enjoy it. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I guess, and we can use ping pong as the example. That's an odd example. Like, why ping pong? I guess you could say, well, why anything? Like, why are there those things that people get really competitive about?
Yeah, I think ping pong, because I would feel like we'd be on even playing field. Like, I could allow myself to think I had a shot.
Okay.
I'm not going to beat our colleague in swimming or skiing, but I might beat you in ping pong. And we could play 100 games and it'll be fun. And if I lost, no big deal. But if I can let myself get to a place where this is not fun. Do you know what I mean? And I have to actively stop myself from doing that.
Well, and I think because in the first two examples with our colleagues, I mean, you're being competitive, but you're kind of just being a shit disturber, right? That's just your way to relate to them.
Yes.
Right. And so
Yes.
it's like, yeah, you know, as you just say, you know, you're going to lose. But with ping pong, as you said, you think
Yes.
that there's a shot that you could be better than me or anyone else.
Yes.
And then
And
if you
so,
play and routinely lose, then you could get pissed off.
yes.
Okay.
If I put myself in that position. So so all that being said, I wonder how they evaluate. I just wonder how do you as a researcher, how do you assess what that looks like? You know, like the research you're talking about, and they're looking at, men are more likely to want to compete, because I would probably always want to compete, but I don't know that I would characterize those competitions as being like truly competitive versus somebody who may be like, I don't want to compete at all, because it's always a painful endeavor. I don't even know.
Right.
I'm sort of talking around this, but I think it's a nuanced like construct, being competitive.
Well, agreed. And I would say there is, at least what the research that I found, there's people who are more competitive tend to be less aware of risk, and less cognizant or focused on the risk. They just think of achieving the goal.
Well,
And
that's
so
interesting.
people who are less competitive, and again, we're talking generalities here, but people that are less competitive might be a bit more aware of the downsides or issues of just going forward with something.
Wait, hold on. When you say risk, do you mean the risk of losing or the risk of failure
Failure.
of injury?
Yeah, failure or losing. Yeah. So people who are more competitive are more likely to attempt to try something.
Yeah. Okay. So can we just, as a thought experiment? So is it possible that everybody is competitive? People that show up and compete more, like a Michael Jordan figure, for example, wants to compete at everything. And for him, when he's competing, he's not thinking about the risk of losing because he's so competitive. So everything's a competition. And then what if we're talking about somebody who's not competitive? Maybe they're equally invested in winning as Michael Jordan, but they disengage and avoid it because they don't want to lose. Like the distress from losing is the same, but do they avoid it because they're aware of the risk that might happen?
Yeah, I can see that. And you're competing against a Michael Jordan in the 90s.
Yeah.
Maybe, again, making this up, maybe the assumption is, this guy's going to kick my ass.
I don't care what it is, I'm going to lose.
Yeah. And so the worst I can do is try, and maybe I'll be the 5% of people who win a game against the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
So there's no risk there to you as the person, because the assumption is you're not as good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Similar to what you were saying. The assumption is you're not a world-class skier or swimmer.
Yes.
So there's no downside for you, because otherwise you're proven right.
Mm-hmm.
Or by some miracle you win.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in a situation where the kind of stakes are higher, so if you are Michael Jordan, yeah, it's probably occupying a bit more of your headspace. Like, I better keep doing this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's interesting.
So the other thing I was thinking through here is, well, I mean, competition is something we talk about. Well, why is it something we talk about? So there's a lot of reasons for it. Some interesting research, right? If you think anthropologically, just evolutionarily, there's that survival of the fittest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more than just competition. But, if there is a scarcity of resources, which we could argue right now is a lot less likely to happen, but at some point in our, past, there was some scarcity of resources. More competitive individuals were more successful.
Wait, is that true?
Survival of the fittest?
No, I know survival of the fittest is true, but does it make you better at stuff if you? Well, let's start here. When you say competition, do you mean enjoys competition or will compete?
I think my assumption is someone who enjoys competition, because I think most people will compete. I don't know. Why do I think that though? I think people engage in competition even if they don't like it, but I think there are differences between people who do enjoy that more than others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to sort of think through it because I think what you said is right. Like if you asked me, David, I want you to create a team of, I don't care what it is, artists, researchers, writers, things that are not traditionally competitive. And you said, David, you can choose a team of people that are hyper competitive or people that are not competitive. I would assume the hyper competitive group of people would be better at that thing. Maybe not teaming, but I think the intensity that comes from competition is a value add, which maybe is a bad assumption. But I guess what I'm trying to think of from an evolutionary standpoint, just the fact that you're forced into competition.
Right.
Right. If there's you're competing for resources
Right.
or you're competing for mates or whatever it is, and you don't have an opportunity not to do it at that phase at that time. So I guess I'm wondering if now we view it as a positive thing because it's is competition a display of skills, which is attractive, and then that gene moves forward.
It propagates. It continues. That makes sense to me. I would say, yeah, because even if ancestors from tens of thousands of years ago didn't enjoy competition, they had to be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They had to compete for resources, maybe not within, their communities or whatever, but certainly between communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think you see that with animals still now, especially more community focused animals. They're still, I'm not an expert or a primatologist, but when I watch the nature specials on chimpanzees and stuff, they're not just, sharing and bartering their food between each other, right? They're
a lot of high fives.
They're fighting and killing each other. So there is that sense, that so there is more of that zero sum mindset, I would imagine, that lasted up until some certain point, and still, I would say, probably happens for some folks now. Like if I win, then you lose, and if I lose, then you win. Like there's just that and/or thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably a lot more reality way back when than it is now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's that.
Yep.
I think, there is, especially for those who are competitive and win, there's a bit of a chemical reinforcement there, a dopamine hit when you do win.
Yes. Yes.
So I know that feels true to me. Playing my nerdy computer, my CD-ROM. I had a Jeopardy game when I was a kid, of course. And I'd play with, parents or friends, and I'd win. Dopamine hit. Yep. Reinforcing. I'm smarter. I know these stupid facts that doesn't really matter to know, but I know them more than you do.
Yes.
There's a dopamine hit there where I didn't get a dopamine hit if I, didn't hit the ball in pitch ball, but I certainly got it there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe the same because I was not doing CD-ROM Jeopardy. But I probably would have the difference is that if I played that game, I would have gotten 0 dopamine hits because I would not have gotten a single answer right.
You wouldn't.
So you should do sort of grab, but and so as a consequence, I go, I don't care about CD-ROM Jeopardy. Mm-hmm. It's not my thing. So I wonder if we all, try and find the thing that we're trying to find the dopamine. We're trying to figure out where am I going to be successful so that I can feel good.
And I think, and I agree. And I think if you find, so whatever you are competitive about. So I see this on The Amazing Race sometimes, right? The teams, so in The Amazing Race, there are 2-person teams. And oftentimes in the beginning, the high performing teams, however they're evaluated, are viewed pretty quickly. Neither people want to make alliances with these teams, or they're just identified as, okay, if we can screw them over somehow, let's get them out of the race. Mm-hmm. But they are the focus of a lot of the other teams. Like, all right, I need to move up to that team's ability level. And if you look at some of the research on competition, that's one of the benefits of competition for folks who are, or for a person or a team that is not quite as high performing as they could. If they set a goal to be like another team that is high performing, or like another person that's high performing, right? If you're playing basketball in the 90s and you see Michael Jordan, like, you may not ever be that good, but it's a goal to strive toward. So it provides you with a lot of focus that reinforces, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to practice a lot. I'm going to give up other things because this is so important to me. So competition, I think, can be helpful in that way. If it provides you with some sort of focus of how you spend your time and energy.
Yes. Yeah. I think that totally makes sense. Like, for a society, it's valuable, but I would imagine I think the next thing you're going to say is that, but it also goes too far where it could be a problem.
It could. So it's over focus.
Like
I said, most people aren't probably going to be Michael Jordan.
Yep.
And so over time, if you keep hitting your head against that wall, what does that make you feel like? That's the downside. You were talking before a little bit too about if you were going to create a team, you probably want the most competitive people on that team to win.
Yeah.
And what the people who research this would say is, probably not, at least not at first. Depending on what the goal is. Yeah. Because
screw those people. I'm smarter than, let's make our own article.
Exactly, right? Let's go on Jeopardy League of Champions.
Wait, so what did they say?
So what they say is you can't have a bunch of people who think that they're the best, because they're not going to want to work and collaborate with everyone else. They're going to just show how they're the best. And so you have to be appropriately incentivized, right? You have to, if you think of a sports team.
Yes.
I think that's why so much of this research is in sports, because especially team sports, because it's such a great way to look at some of this. If you have a team full of Michael Jordans, how does that work? They're all trying, they may be all great, but are they working well together? Are they able to achieve the common goal, or are they trying to just promote themselves?
Okay, so this is what I'm aware of, is that speaking of being competitive, so my default is to disagree with this research.
Right.
And so let me just make my argument, and maybe it's because I have a weak ego and don't like being wrong, but here's my argument is, if you were to look at any professional, any collegiate, even any high school team,
okay,
all of those players are going to, on an assessment, are going to identify as being competitive.
Sure. Right.
So if you asked me, David, are you competitive? I would say I'm very competitive, but I didn't even play college soccer. Right. But I feel like, and I like to compete. Right. But if you compare me to Steve Kerr, who played with Michael Jordan, I wonder if Steve Kerr and I would both say that we're equally competitive, though Steve Kerr and I competed on a very different level. And I bet you that if Steve Kerr took an assessment and compared his scores to Michael Jordan, they're both going to top out on the scale as far as competition.
Sure.
And so when they look at high functioning teams, aren't they all maxing out on whatever competitive scale they're using? And so I guess I would argue that there's no super high functioning team composed of people that are like, oh, I don't give a shit about my particular sport. I don't care if we win. Right. But I think what happens is they're like a team of dogs. You know how when dogs meet, the first thing this is an odd example, but dogs meet.
Go on.
And dogs meet and they immediately smell each other's butts.
Sure.
Right. And what they're trying to figure out is, who's the alpha dog here? And dogs will quickly create the hierarchy and go, okay, if we're going to function as a pack, Jordan, the guy with the stinkiest butt over there, is going to be the leader, and we're going to all step in line. So they're competitive, but they are smart enough to organize themselves around the goal that they're pursuing.
And I think that's it, is the goal. What is the goal? Okay. So you have to have a common goal. Just like anything else. If you're a team of smelly butted alphas, then what's the common goal? right? The common goal is to just be the high, top, get
Yes.
the top of the hierarchy, right? But if there's a different goal outside of just each of you individually, or each of the dogs individually, each of the athletes in a team individually, which is to win a game,
Yeah.
that's when individual competition and the focus on the individual
Mm-hmm.
can decrease and the focus on the team can increase. There's some other research I found that will say, like, what's the benefit of an effective coach? A coach's experience doesn't have as much impact.
Uh-huh.
Their style doesn't have as much impact. It's their ability to get a team of high performing people to get outside of themselves and look at the common goal of just winning a game. So I think that encapsulates it really well.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true at work, right? If you're managing a team of people, now there's not maybe as much inherent competition in organizations, but you and I doing the work that we do both know that, the more you can get a team focused on a goal,
yes,
and each of their individual roles, the clarity that they have about their role in achieving that goal, the more likely they are to achieve that goal. And more effective managers, a different way to say it is, the most effective managers realize that that's part of their role.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd probably say it the most. Kind of what you're saying is, if you have a manager who sees the goal acquisition as if the goal for the manager is to build an empire where they get that thing, they're going to be less effective at building a team that they're supporting to get the goal.
Right.
Right. And we see that a lot where managers are so consumed with their own goal acquisition that they're not good at working within the larger structure of the organization. And, I mean, the goal becomes a very narrow goal that only serves one person versus being able to say, hey, what's the goal for all of us? And how do I get people to line up around that?
Right. Yeah. That is a better way of saying it. I like that better.
We should write a book called, never mind.
That's something to do with smelly butts.
Yeah. Never mind.
I feel like in some podcasts I listen to, right, they'll have some random like outtake of something ridiculous that someone says. This is the random outtake of this episode, is just people hearing a 30-second clip of us talking about smelly dog asses.
Organizing dog butts. Yeah.
I realized we started talking about what I'm competitive about, and I didn't, other than ping pong, didn't ask you what you get competitive about.
I get a lot. I'm competitive about a lot of things. It was making me think about, there's a couple of times where I feel like good sort of examples. One is when I was I was not a good high school. I mean, I was a fine high school student, but I was like a B average. And that meant that I was really good at like ceramics and really bad at math. So the things that mattered, I wasn't so good at. And then I went to college and I was still a bad student. And then I took a class it's called psychobio. And I still remember Dr. Vu was the teacher, and we would take a test, and every week we had a pop quiz or whatever, not a pop quiz. We had a quiz every week, and he would announce at the end of the test who in the class got the highest score. And there was this kid that I didn't even know that always won. Like he won like 3 weeks in a row. And I don't know what, something happened. And I was like, that motherfucker wins again. He doesn't even know who I am, but I was like, I'm going to beat him. And then that became an obsess. I would study. I mean, too much, because I was like, but that guy's not studying. And sure enough, I'd beat his ass on all those tests. And he still was a straight A student, got A's on all the tests, but I beat him a little. But when they announced my name, I was like, what's up, motherfucker? Right? I got very, and he didn't even know who. So like I heard that, where I'm not even studying for, this is not fun. This is I need to beat that guy at psychobio. And it turned, by the way, I would not be a psychologist today if I hadn't started getting A's, and I got A's in that class. It was a hard class. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm capable of getting A's. And then I did much better academically after like teaching myself that I could do that.
So it sounds like you need to send a letter, an email to Dr. Vu and this student, thanking them for all the success that you've experienced as a professional, because without it, you wouldn't be here.
I would not be here. Yes. I owe Dr. Vu, definitely. And yeah,
it's go ahead.
no, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say it's interesting because when I was looking at some research, they talk specifically. There's a specific set of research just on rivalries, like a 1-to-1 type of competition, and what they'll say is exactly what just that's a perfect example of the benefits of a rivalry, which is it can up your performance because you have a goal, which is that person.
Yeah.
So that student for you was your rival, so to speak.
Yes.
And they upped your performance.
Yeah. Even though he had no idea who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for him. Yeah.
But I think, yeah. So that in that case, the extreme focus was helpful, but in other cases, the extreme focus, not so helpful.
Yeah. I get competitive a couple times. I think you probably, this is a couple years ago, but one of our managing partners was comparing and contrasting productivity of members of our team. And she was like, "Oh, you're really close to this person." And I lost my mind the last like 2 months of the year because of that. I couldn't help but get overly wrapped up into that situation. So there are like moments where I go like, "Oh," and it's not. I mean, like usually it's fun, but it's not fun. On YouTube, I feel very competitive.
About what?
I can't put enough. Because I'm on YouTube, and it's just like it's just a hobby. It's just for fun, but it's so metric driven, and there are so many people. Like you can go and compare how your video performs compared to somebody else's video, and it's very distressing for me when I see a video made that is way better than mine, and I can't make a video that good. And it's also distressing when I see a video that I think isn't very good, but for whatever reason does really well. And I'm like, what? I can't. And it bothers me, even though it's like, for what? It doesn't matter. It's not my job. It's just for fun. But I feel myself being, I mean, it's enough that I had to delete the YouTube app on my phone because I was stressed out if my video didn't perform well.
Yeah. So I guess listeners, please, if you want Dave to be a psychologically sound individual, please listen and like these videos. But
like and subscribe.
Fuck with Dave. I guess don't do it at my expense. Just continue to not listen to his or watch his YouTube videos that I have nothing to do with. But I would say I have a similar experience for some, like as a professional, as I reflect upon when I started working in this field, 14, 15 years ago and to now, and it still happens to me now sometimes. It's like, I feel like I know the answer. And when I'm working with someone, we have a colleague who has a different perspective. He has a clinical background, and he has an interesting perspective on some things. And he and I will talk sometimes, and I'm like, gosh, that makes so much sense. It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
We're both psychologists. We have just different educational backgrounds. And he'll say something. My God, that makes so much sense. And I feel there's this part of me that's like, shit, why didn't I think of that? Why did that never occur to me? Like, I'm a smart person.
Yeah.
I should have figured that out. I'm a psychologist. I do the same thing he does. So that gets in so again, it's all back to my intellect there. It's more about, I should have known that.
That's interesting. So it goes back. That's interesting so for me, it's not about, I mean, for me, it's just the ranking, but for you, it's the thinking.
The ranking, I could give it. I mean, not give a shit, but I mean, I care.
Yes.
But I think for me, it is any display of some sort of intellect or ability that way. Mm-hmm. And if I feel that someone has a leg up on me in a way that I think I should, that still gets me. I'm a lot more aware of it now. Mm-hmm. I used to be, but I used to over focus on it.
Yeah. I
would focus a lot on, all right, I need to be better at that specific thing. Mm-hmm. And then you think, well, why? I can't know everything. I don't need to know everything. But there's that voice in my head that said, dude, no, someone knows more than you in this thing, and that's unacceptable. I've had to work through that a lot as a professional and as a person.
So, or maybe that was a convincing argument to go against kind of how I viewed it before this discussion, and even like throughout the whole discussion, I was thinking, yeah, so it's adaptive. And then you just described that, and I was thinking, so really, the issue is that I need to decouple my identity and my like value from some arbitrary ranking, and you need to decouple your identity, your value from intellect or knowledge. So in that way, it serves for performance purposes, but it may not serve from like a psychological health standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Neither of us. Yeah. When I'm focusing on someone who is just going to know more about something than I am.
Yes.
And I'm spending all of my time trying to understand that specific field or space more. There's no need for that.
Yeah.
It occupies too much of my time and my headspace in a way that's unhealthy. So I think that's where competition can really be not so great.
That's interesting. All right. You've convinced me. All right. That makes sense.
So I don't know. I think we've kind of, I've said what I wanted to say about competition. And I think that given your comment, I've won you over and have in fact outcompeted you and won the conversation.
No, but I'm going to create a bunch of fake YouTube accounts and I'm going to keep saying like, man, David's points were better than Rob's on that one. Rob's not very smart. That's
it'll be a win-win for both of us then, won't it?
Yeah. All right. Perfect. That was fun. That was a good conversation.
Agreed. Until next time, Dave.